Hello, listeners. Mallory Wilsey here, Chief Producer of the M.F.A Network, and I want to take just a quick moment to tell you about another show on our podcast network that I think you'll love. Mission Admissions cuts through the noise in college admissions and recruitment. Host Jeremy Tiers brings a fresh perspective, packing each episode with straight-talk advice, tips, and strategies from a mix of pros inside and outside higher ed. One of the things I love most about the show is how Jeremy often brings voices from outside the industry to share perspectives and practices that can be applied to the work that marketers and enrollment professionals like you do every day. You can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Mission Admissions wherever you get your podcasts.
I would want to make sure that people know you don't have to go into this being an expert. There's so much of it that we've all figured out along the way.
Welcome to Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager, a podcast that addresses the do's, don'ts, and dynamics of the digital ecosystem specific to higher education. I'm your host, Jenny Lee Fowler. Join me every other week for discussions with some of the best minds in higher education social media management and marketing. Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager is a part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Hello, friends. I am delighted to have colleague and friend Danielle Sewell join us today. Danielle is the Director of Digital Marketing at York College of Pennsylvania. And Danielle and I are both faculty members of Dr. Josie Alquist's Digital Community Cohort. Danielle, hello. Thanks for joining us.
Hi. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited for us to spend this time together. And we're about to get nerdy over data in a second.
My favorite thing.
Exactly. I love it. But first, can you tell us how you got into higher ed social media?
Sure. I guess I got into the social media part of it before the higher ed part. So I think like many millennials of a certain age who are in this field, I was working not in higher ed at first, but sort of de facto became a social media manager because social media was new back in the day. And I was the young person who knew technology things. And so, sure, let's absolutely have her be the voice of the brand on social media. So that's how I got started, did that in other industries for a few years, and then started looking at higher ed for roles. And I remember for my first higher ed job, I had not worked with higher ed or those audiences at all before. So I got this interview invitation and was like, I don't know how to talk to these people. So I went on Twitter at the time and did some research about what hashtags people were using to have these conversations. You might remember hashtag HESM was a really big thing for a while. So I went on there and I asked people if they had any tips or resources for people doing marketing and communications work specifically in higher ed. And then, of course, I did not know at the time, but then this community did what this community does and sent me all of the resources and tagged me and made introductions and sent tips and blog links and everything you could imagine. So I sort of became a student of the field at that point and ended up getting that job. And some of the people who sent me resources during that plea for help are still in my community and people that I see at conferences and on LinkedIn and hang out with. And I think Josie Alquist may have actually been one. So, of course, we both still work with her really frequently. So it's funny how there's kind of been a common thread from the very beginning.
I would add that, hashtag HESM is still a thing. It's still a very vibrant and strong community, and we really support one another. It's a very motivational
aspirational, inspirational community. I love that community.
Yes, higher ed marketing is so good about sharing with one another. It's really nice to not be in like a super cutthroat industry where we're all kind of hiding secrets, but elevating each other.
All right. I love the love for higher ed social media. But so let's get this out of the way early. Data is not necessarily doing math.
Correct. I think a lot of people have this like image when they just hear the word data or data analysis, God forbid, of this like person like focused and staring at a laptop with a calculator and crunching numbers or like doing calculus on a chalkboard or something like really intense. And I mean, I won't lie, it's helpful to know how to use like a Google sheet and get some basic formulas set up, but it's not like intense math in any way. If anything, it's more, I feel like a blend of scientific method and like being a detective almost of
Yeah,
the numbers
like
are just information.
Yes, that's exact. Yes, information and research, and then what you do with it is storytelling. Which
Absolutely.
And you're right. I would say some of the toughest math that I have to do is maybe calculating percentages. We just need percentage increases, and you can actually do that online using a percentage increase calculator.
I
on
have
the
used
internet.
those calculators. Year over year growth. I never remember which number goes first, but I look it up.
Exactly. So you can actually just, find a calculator on the internet and it will work perfectly. So Danielle, say you're a new social media manager or managing a new brand. Where do you start with data?
I think the first step, whether you have a brand new account or if you're just coming into a role and there's not really a lot of data for you to pick up, is establishing some benchmarks. And I think for higher ed, most of us are working on an annual cycle, right? Like, so what happens in December, it's usually really quiet after the students leave for the winter break. May, we usually have commencements, and summers, it's usually pretty quiet again. So we have these like cycles of things that happen every year. So I like to look at things on a year over year basis. So for the first year, collecting data is really just finding out what's normal for your institution, for your accounts, for your audiences. And so it sounds like a long time, but you can make some judgment calls based on data along the way there. But you want to spend that first year, like every month, looking in and pulling whatever metrics make sense for you. And I think figuring out what the business's goals are that you're focusing on with the social accounts and tying a metric specifically to the goal so you can tell if the needle is moving, and just making sure that you're tracking that data on a regular basis and keeping in mind if you're using the platform's native analytics, some of them don't let you pull data for a full year retroactively. So just make sure that you're collecting the information that you want to look at or that you might want to look at in the future so you have it at the ready. And then you can really the next year get into the nitty gritty comparisons.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying. I think benchmarks are even important at the post level. I like to know what my averages are, like how an average post in X performs or how an average post in Instagram performs, because then you know what's performing well and what's underperforming, and you can kind of dig into that a little bit.
Definitely. And you want to benchmark against yourself too.
Right.
I know.
Right.
I mean, I'm at York College of Pennsylvania. It's a small to medium-sized regional private. You're at MIT. I can't compare my numbers to yours. Like if I...
it should be apples to apples, right?
Absolutely. So if I say Jenny had a really good post and she's got 2,000 views on it, a really good post for York College is more like 500 views. And that's okay.
Right.
That's great because the audiences aren't the same. Yeah. So it's important to know what your benchmark is.
Yes.
For your institution, and then you can grow from there.
Yeah, I that's more important. You need to really have a realistic look at where your averages, your benchmarks, your numbers are. So once you've established your benchmarks, what's next? What do you do after that?
I think that's when the fun starts in a
Yes.
lot of ways. So you're going to want to probably use that year over year growth calculator. That'll be a helpful tool for you. But I think it's about looking at those metrics that you decided way back when were tied to your goals and then comparing them over time. So this commencement season, we saw that engagement went up significantly over last year or decreased significantly over last year. And so you can, first of all, when you have that benchmark, you can measure and say, you know what the change was. But also then you have the opportunity to think about, why did that change happen? Was there a change in the type of content that we put out? Was there a change in the frequency of the content? Was there an external change or something that was happening in the news or some event that happened that changed the metrics and how they came through? Was there an algorithm change that happens sometimes too? I'm looking at you, Instagram, where sometimes the numbers are just different. And then you do a little bit of Googling and find an article that says that, oh, Instagram suddenly prioritized stories or reels and you were still posting on the grid. So I think also making sure that when you're measuring the data, you measure context is also really important as much as keeping track of those numbers. I like to, on my reports, have a context and sentiment section where I sort of will make note if there was any big event on campus or if something went viral or if there was a campus crisis or an algorithm change, anything like that. So I can look back and understand fully what was happening in a certain year rather than just assuming that.
It was the algorithm or yeah. So, okay, you just unloaded a bunch of information on us, and I think I'm gonna try to like piece some things together. One thing you did say earlier was when, tie back to your goals. And sometimes, which is why it's so important to have goals, right? You should have goals. But I think sometimes people overthink that. If you're just trying to grow your channels, like gain more brand awareness, your primary metric would be growth, followers, right? And so that's the number that you're looking at. Or if there's a certain type of messaging or messaging priority, say you opened a new college of computing and that message is important, then I would look at the engagement on the posts of that of content that relates to that messaging, right? I was just kind of like wanting to like drill that down because sometimes I think people overthink it and they think tying goals to content or they think it's more complex than that, and it doesn't have to be.
No, it doesn't have to be. And I think we have a tool that I use when we're teaching in the digital community cohort that I call a goal to metrics matchmaker, which is sometimes helpful. So you can select, I want to build awareness about something. And then the little tool spits back an answer and says, look at reach, look at follower count. That's
And
helpful.
can you share that link? We will definitely.
I'll share that with you.
Okay, great.
Absolutely. So I think that's a helpful tool. But yeah, I mean, it's everything from when you're first getting started. You're not going to really make much of a difference at all if you have absolutely no following with people you want followed. So some of those are more internal platform-based goals. And then once you get rolling, you can look at your department or your college's strategic plan is a great place to start. Most strategic plans that I've seen from colleges have something in there about student engagement or increasing campus life or student like school spirit. All of those are things that happen really organically on social media channels. And there are ways to measure that, whether it's through impressions or engagement or looking at specific types of posts. So I think if you're at a loss of what should I measure, taking a look at those strategic planning documents might spark some ideas.
Yeah, I agree. And you're stressing, like we're stressing, it doesn't have to be an entire spreadsheet of information. It can be, it's like the engagement or it's the shares or it's the click-throughs. If you're trying to tie in social media content to a website, it would be the click-throughs. So don't overthink it, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. I think sometimes people tend to overthink it because you read all of these like thought leadership blogs that have these references to quote unquote vanity metrics. I hate that term. There's no such thing as a vanity metric. We talked about numbers are just information. And that's true. So what information could be vanity. It's not. It's just getting more information to paint the picture so you have a full understanding of what's going on. So, no, impressions are absolutely not a vanity metric. If you want to know about reach or if you want to build awareness. So, I think it's really important to not get caught up in thinking you're like settling for the easy metrics or something like that. It's valuable information. So, definitely keep track of it, especially for brand awareness and engagement.
Yes, Danielle. Yes, I agree. I often say metrics are not vain. People are vain.
Yes.
So if the metrics can be meaningful if they're teaching you something or telling you something. Now, if you're only trying to report big numbers, then
Right.
that could be meaningless. But it all depends on what information you're looking for. So yes, I completely agree. Okay, so now the portion that you were talking about reporting, because you started talking about reporting a little bit. How do you recommend handling reporting? Maybe from someone who's starting out to someone who is trying to level up a little bit.
Sure. I mean, I think the first step is just making sure that you're building the reports that help you analyze the information in a way that's meaningful. I would advise against just downloading the kind of data dump from either the organic platform analytics in the back end, or if you have a tool like Sprout or HubSpot or Hootsuite, something like that, you can have these really big, huge spreadsheets that you download, but it's almost overwhelming in a lot of cases. And you want to focus.
It's too much.
Absolutely. You want to be able to focus on the things that are actually actionable. Like, I want to know X about my post, and depending on what I find out about it, that will inform how I post again in the future. Something like that. So look at those and find out what works for you. Some people love a spreadsheet. Some people like to do these like highly designed infographic type of things. There's not a right or a wrong way to do reporting. Just make sure that it's something that is maintainable over the long term, because it's not like you're going to stop doing the reports or stop collecting data at any point. So don't make it super painful for yourself. It doesn't have to be like really intense and time consuming. And I know a lot of people who are doing social media aren't just doing social media at college campuses. So do yourself a favor, streamline the process as much as possible and make it work for you. And
keep it simple, right?
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
We don't have enough time in our day. Don't eat it up where you don't need to.
Yeah, honestly. And I would even add that our audience, the people we're sending the reports to, are even busier than we are, or at least as busy as we are. So
absolutely.
I think it's important to keep it simple so they'll read it.
Yeah.
And they'll get something meaningful from it.
Yes. And they get an even different report. That's sort of on the more advanced side. Once you start reporting out or over to other departments or to VPs or presidents or whomever, I will never send anybody outside of my immediate team my data report, because it has all of the things in it. And it's sort of like raw data at a point. So when I send somebody not in my department a social media report, I don't want to rely on them and put the onus on them to understand what it says, right? Like, I'm sending it to them for a reason. There's already something there that I want them to understand. So I'll pull together like a quick one sheet or a slide or two with screenshots that says, these are the key takeaways from what I'm seeing, and these are the data points that show that that's true. So it's, again, that storytelling piece of, we have learned something from this information. This is how we know that to be true. And you use the data as supporting evidence for your storytelling, your information of your learnings that you're delivering to people.
Yes, I love that, because I mean, who likes to get a spreadsheet in an email? Like, let's be honest. If I get an Excel spreadsheet and it's got all these numbers on it, my eyes go cross-eyed almost, and I don't know what I'm looking at or what I need to take away from it. So I agree. I think you are the keeper of the data, and you are responsible for telling the true story, right? Not just the good, not just trying to make yourself look good. You need to be honest about what the data is saying, and and recommend and make recommendations. I think that is what having data and collecting data is really all about.
Yeah, and nobody knows your accounts better than you when you're the person who's in there day in and day out. You're not just seeing the count of how many comments you got, you're seeing the comments themselves. So yeah, sharing that in a really digestible format is important. And I think customizing it too, if you know a little bit about the person you're sharing it with. Some people are super visual. They don't want to look at more than one sheet of paper. That's fine. Put it on one sheet of paper for them. There are a lot of people I know at higher levels in higher ed who aren't on TikTok themselves, yet TikTok is a really important part of the strategy for recruiting students and engaging with current students. But they don't actually know what TikTok really looks like on the back end. So if I just talk to them about, yeah, we had this post on TikTok that went really viral and it was great. Okay, that's nice. They're nodding their head, but they don't actually know what I'm talking about. So if we can give them at least a screenshot or a screen record or something like that, that just helps to kind of paint the picture and then bring them in a little bit. So you're not talking at them, you're having a conversation with them.
Yeah, and actually, I think you might have mentioned this earlier, but it's really important to don't make any assumptions that they know what anything is, because the jargon changes for everything. There's a TikTok, there's a reel, there's a short. And so I often add a glossary at the end of my reports, and just don't assume anything, and don't be overly jargony or acronymy. That's not a word, but you know what I'm saying. I just think you should explain as you go, because you don't want to make anyone feel bad about, maybe not knowing the difference between a reel and a short. You're there to educate, right? Because it's really your area of expertise.
Slap a glossary on the end or at the beginning, or put footnotes in there, something, whatever fits your format.
Totally.
And yeah, definitely spell out the acronym before you just start using the acronym.
100%. I do want to ask you, what kind of platforms or how do you suggest people recommend, collecting data? Because I think there's no one size fits all answer for this, right?
Yeah, we use Sprout at York College now, and that's a really nice reporting tool. It makes things easier. It slices and dices data in some interesting ways. I have not always had at various jobs the opportunity or the budget to have that kind of software. I still had data. So it's not like you need to have all of the bells and whistles. They're really helpful and they save some time. But Google Sheet and Excel spreadsheets, those also work really great, either totally on their own or supplementing the data that you pull from other platforms. It's just about kind of finding what works for you in a way that you can at least capture the data in the long term that you want to be looking at over time. And if you have the opportunity to maybe have Excel do some of that year over year math for you, that's also really helpful. Just put it in the cell and let it take care of it.
Yeah, but it's true. A lot of us have not always had the budgets for any sort of third-party solution. So I think it's important to stress that you can collect data from the platforms themselves. And in fact, that's what the third-party solutions are doing, is collecting that data from the platforms. They're just doing that for you and making it look pretty and putting it in nice summaries is what it's doing. So that's what but the source is all the same. I always like to say that. Okay, Danielle, is there anything about data that you think we haven't covered yet, or that you wished I'd asked you?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think the big thing is I would want to make sure that people know you don't have to go into this being an expert. There's so much of it that we've all figured out along the way. None of us who started in higher ed social media marketing knew exactly how to do higher ed social media marketing at our institutions. And we learned. We either came from different industries or different backgrounds, or we worked at a different institution, but every institution is very different and distinct. And you learn through the data how to adjust. But also likewise, I mean, I don't know a lot of people who had any kind of official formal training that resulted in them being both a good writer, a good photographer, a decent graphic designer, a social media manager, a communication specialist, and a really good reporting analyst. Like you kind of figure out what you need as you go. And you can't be the best at all of the things, but you can know enough to get the information that you need once you understand a little bit more about the role and specifically what you're looking for. So don't hold yourself back just because you're not an expert to start with. And there are tons and tons of resources out there. Like I said, all of those lovely people at the beginning of my career in higher ed who sent me those resources are still out there creating resources and speaking at conferences and writing blog posts and making TikToks and sharing things. And there's always more information. We're all just in the business of knowing our business, and there are plenty of opportunities to keep learning.
I love that thought. Thank you so much. So Danielle, I always ask this as my final question to all of my guests, but what is your confession?
My confession is that I am actually terrified of being on social media this fall. I hate social media during an election season. If I could turn my phone off and go hide on an island for the next 6 months, I probably would do it. Yeah, I'm legitimately dreading being in the digital space come October, November, but we will get through it as we always have in the past, but it's not fun. It's not a good time.
Yeah. Danielle, so I will say that you are not alone in that. And I'm sure higher ed social media managers will come together once again and just support each other, or at least vent, right?
I'm sure we will. We're really good at that.
Yes. Danielle, it was such a pleasure. I love chatting with you. Thank you so much for spending your time with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Allison Tercio, Mallory Wilsey, and so many others of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.